My name is Elise Bennett. I'm 42 years old. I'm a doctor specializing in public health. I currently lead a healthcare program that serves nearly 20 million people across the state of New York, but my family doesn't know that. To them, I'm just the quiet older sister, someone who does something at a hospital, maybe a receptionist. At that dinner party, no one asked what I did. They simply assumed, and they assumed wrong. Then an important guest walked in, looked at me, and said, "This is the State Director of Public Health." The whole room fell silent, and for the first time in my life, they couldn't look away. If you've ever been misunderstood, if you've ever stayed silent just to keep the peace at the dinner table, this story is for you.
Rachel is 4 years younger than me. From a young age, she commanded the spotlight, not with arrogance, but with a kind of effortless magnetism. She had the kind of laugh that made rooms turn, the charm that won over teachers and friends alike. At family gatherings, she was the one telling stories, making people laugh, passing around pictures of her latest social campaign or celebrity interview. Me? I was the one setting the table, clearing the dishes, staying quiet. I liked it that way, at least at first. I was more comfortable in the background, watching, listening, studying. I loved patterns, systems, the way communities functioned. That's what drew me to public health. It wasn't about glory, it was about service. We grew up in a modest home in Syracuse, New York. Dad was a tax accountant, steady and methodical. Mom taught second grade at the local public school, warm but often preoccupied. They worked hard, they loved us, but over time they saw more of themselves in Rachel. Or maybe she just made it easier for them to connect. When Rachel got her first job as a junior content producer at a lifestyle magazine, they celebrated like she'd landed on national television. When I got into Columbia with a full scholarship to study epidemiology, I remember Mom saying, "Oh, honey, that's great, so proud. What's epidemiology again?" At first, I tried. I'd explain about disease prevention, population data, vaccine logistics, but their eyes glazed over. Eventually, I stopped explaining. I let them think I worked at some clinic, doing admin, filing charts, helping people fill out forms. Over the years, Rachel's star rose fast. She launched her own PR firm. She was featured in Forbes 30 Under 30. She gained tens of thousands of followers on Instagram, led viral campaigns, started a podcast interviewing visionary women. And me, I was managing multi-million-dollar public health initiatives, building coalitions between hospitals and clinics, writing health equity policy, directing emergency response strategies. When the COVID pandemic hit, I was in war mode 24/7. I slept on a cot in the state health office. I wrote nightly briefings for the governor. I coordinated vaccine supply chains across counties, trained contact tracing teams, secured mobile health units for migrant workers. No one in my family knew any of that. When we finally had a family Zoom call after months of lockdown, Dad asked, "Still working from home, Elise?" I was too exhausted to correct him. Rachel, meanwhile, was launching a Resilient Women webinar series, her way of contributing to the pandemic conversation. She had masks made with her logo. My mom ordered 12. I wasn't resentful, not exactly. I just existed in a parallel universe, one where my work was urgent, invisible, and thankless, one where recognition meant fewer deaths, not more likes. Every so often, Rachel would tag me in a post. "Shout out to my amazing sister Elise, saving lives behind the scenes." The comments would be sweet. "So proud of her. Tell her thank you." But Rachel never really asked me what I did. Not once. The disconnect became so familiar that I stopped noticing it, until that one phone call. "Hey sis, so I'm throwing this little networking dinner next weekend. Nothing formal, just some friends from media, a few partners, maybe some health tech people too. Would love for you to come, in case it's useful for you to meet anyone." It was classic Rachel, effervescent, vague, a little self-serving, a little genuine. I hesitated. "I don't know, Rach, I've got a lot going on next week." "Oh, come on. Just one night, it'll be chill. Plus, it would mean a lot to me if you were there." That part gave me pause. Not because I believed it, but because I wanted to. So I said yes, and that's how I ended up at a rooftop lounge in Lower Manhattan, surrounded by soft jazz, signature cocktails, and people who knew everything about how things looked, but nothing about how things worked. As I walked in, Rachel rushed over. She hugged me, her face bright. "You look great. I love that blazer. Very intelligent powerhouse." I laughed. "It's just navy."
Exactly, she said, guiding me into the room. Okay, come meet people. I met a few of her colleagues, upbeat, stylish, all seemingly named Jess or Max. One woman said, "So Rachel tells me you work in healthcare. That must be intense." "It can be," I nodded. "I'm with the state health department." "Oh, cool, like HR stuff or compliance?" "Something like that." The conversation moved on, no one lingered, and I didn't correct them, I never do. I sat near the back, sipping sparkling water, watching the evening unfold. Rachel worked the room with practiced charm, weaving stories, drawing laughs. She was good at it. It was her gift. I didn't resent her, I admired her. But I also knew no one here, not even my sister, really knew who I was. And part of me wondered if they ever would. I stayed tucked into the corner, a safe distance from the laughter and swirling conversation. My glass of water sat half-finished in front of me, the ice slowly melting. Around me, Rachel's world buzzed, animated, glamorous, loud. I watched as she floated through the crowd like someone who belonged to every room she walked into, effortless, shining. A pair seated nearby chatted about the influencer campaign they'd recently completed with Rachel. I wasn't listening closely, but then I heard the familiar drop of my name. "What does Rachel's sister do anyway?" one woman asked. A man answered with a dismissive chuckle. "She said something about medical records, admin at a clinic, I think." There it was, the box they'd quietly built for me. Small, safe, easily understood. I wasn't angry, not even hurt, just tired. Tired of being translated down, of having a life's work summarized in 6 words that weren't even close to true. I considered leaving, slipping out before dessert, returning to my apartment and my quiet and my tea, but something kept me still, a curiosity, a waiting. That's when Alan Chu walked in. I recognized him immediately, senior advisor to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We'd worked together throughout the pandemic. I respected him, and he respected me. Seeing him in a place like this felt like watching 2 movies collide. He scanned the room. When our eyes met, recognition sparked in his face. He smiled broadly and crossed the room to me. "Elise? Elise Bennett?" I stood to greet him. "Alan, this is unexpected. Tell me about it," he laughed. "I never imagined you'd be here. Not really your kind of crowd." "Not really. I'm glad, though. I just finished reviewing your latest report, the Hudson Valley rollout. Stellar work. I sent it to the federal task force this morning." Our conversation had barely begun when Rachel's voice rang out from the crowd. "Elise?" she said, confused. Her eyes flicked from me to Alan. Alan turned to the group now pausing around us. "You all know who this is, right?" he asked, gesturing toward me with genuine pride. "This is Dr. Elise Bennett, State Director of Public Health for New York. She's the one who led our statewide COVID response. Vaccine logistics, emergency response, community health equity. She's the reason this state didn't collapse in 2020. The room went still. People froze mid-sip, mid-sentence. Even the background music seemed to dull. Someone near the bar whispered, "Wait, the director?" I felt every eye on me. Some wide with shock, some unsure whether to clap. Rachel stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Her face was unreadable, a strange blend of disbelief, embarrassment, and awe. Alan continued, oblivious to the tension he had ignited. "I had no idea you were Rachel's sister. Makes sense, though. Must run in the family." The moment spun outward. Whispers, flashing cameras. Someone asked for a comment. Another asked if I could speak briefly about my work. I declined gently. "I'm just here as a guest tonight." I found Rachel standing alone by a decorative plant, still holding her glass of rosé. I approached slowly. "You never told me," she said softly. "You never asked," I replied. Her eyes brimmed with something I couldn't quite name. Regret, humility, sorrow. "I just thought you didn't want to talk about work." I nodded, "Because when I did, you weren't listening." Silence passed between us, a silence that carried years. "I'm sorry," she said. "I really didn't know." I offered a small smile. "It's okay. Knowing now is what matters." I left the party early. The city air felt cold against my skin, but also refreshing. As I walked the 12 blocks home, I thought about how long I'd waited for that moment, not to be celebrated, but to be seen. The next morning, I awoke to a text from Rachel. "Can we meet? Just us. I'd like to talk." We met later that evening at a quiet coffee shop near Central Park. Rachel arrived first. She wasn't wearing makeup, no camera in sight, just Rachel, my little sister, nervous and vulnerable. "I owe you more than an apology," she began. "I made a whole brand around spotlighting women who inspire me, and I never saw the one who was closest. You were busy," I said, "and so was I." But that's not an excuse. I let the silence hold. "Do you ever resent me?" she asked. "No," I said, and it was the truth. "But I used to wish you'd ask me real questions, the kind that don't fit in an Instagram caption." Rachel exhaled slowly. "I'd like to ask them now, if you'll let me." I nodded. That night, for the first time in years, we talked like sisters, not performers, not placeholders. Just two women peeling back everything performative and standing in the truth of who we were. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't tearful, but it was honest, and that was enough. 2 days later, Rachel uploaded a new episode of her podcast. It was different from her usual polished interviews. "Today's guest," she said, "is someone you've heard me mention, but maybe never really understood. And that's on me." She introduced me simply. "This is my sister, Elise. She's a doctor. She runs public health for the state. She also saved my life, not with medicine, but with quiet integrity. Let's talk." We recorded the conversation at her studio. It was the first time I'd spoken so candidly in public, not about data or policy, but about being invisible in plain sight. The episode went viral. Messages poured in from women, older sisters, quiet daughters, public servants, scientists, mothers. They wrote about being overlooked, about wanting to be seen without shouting. One email stood out. "I played this for my mom. We haven't spoken in months. Today we had coffee together. Thank you for giving us the words." Another said, "I work in a rural health center. People call me the nice nurse, but I'm the lead administrator. Your story made me feel real again." Rachel forwarded each message. She ended every one with, "You were always this. Now the world knows too." That moment at the rooftop didn't just shift a dinner party. It shifted a narrative. Not just for me, but for every woman who's ever been reduced to a title she never chose, and every family that needs a second chance at seeing each other clearly. The podcast had only been live for 3 days when Rachel forwarded me a voicemail from one of her listeners. A woman's voice, low and trembling. "I haven't spoken to my daughter in 2 years. She thinks I don't care about what she does. This morning I heard your story. I called her. Thank you." I played it twice, not out of vanity, but because something inside me softened with each word. For the first time in my life, my silence, my story, had become something useful to someone else. Not just functional, but healing. That moment didn't fix everything, but it started something, a small realignment, like the slow turning of a ship that had drifted off course for too long. My mother started calling more. Her tone was different, less rushed, less filtered. "How's the outreach project going in the rural counties?" she asked once. "I read something about vaccine hesitancy in immigrant communities. Are you working with them?" I almost dropped my coffee. She continued, "I've been thinking a lot about you. I see public health stories on the news now, and I think my daughter probably has her fingerprints on that." She said it so simply, so plainly, it undid me. Rachel changed too. Not in a dramatic turn-a-new-leaf kind of way, but gradually. She started including new voices on her podcast, women who ran food banks, nurses from free clinics, public school social workers, people who'd never been asked to speak into a microphone, but had been showing up every single day. She called them the unseen leaders. One day she sent me a script from her keynote at a media conference. "The woman who shaped me most doesn't have a PR team. She's never cared about optics or applause. She works in public health, and I mean real public health, not the kind that gets you likes. Her name is Elise. She's also my sister, and I spent years not seeing her clearly, even though she was right in front of me. She didn't ask for feedback. She didn't need to." That fall, I was invited to give a lecture at Columbia, my alma mater. I spoke to a room full of exhausted graduate students, the kind I once was. Midway through my talk, I paused. You know, I said, public health doesn't always look like a war zone. Sometimes it looks like returning emails no one reads. Sometimes it looks like getting policies approved by people who think your work is just theory. But if we do it right, we save lives quietly. We shape systems. And someday, someone might thank you, not with applause, but with survival. One student waited until the end to speak with me. She said, I used to think I'd need to become someone else to make an impact. Now I think I just need to become more of who I am. I wrote that down in my journal. A few weeks later, Rachel and I took a road trip upstate, just us. No itinerary, no cameras, no roles to play. We drove through the Adirondacks, stopped at farm stands, ate greasy burgers at roadside diners. At night, we stayed in a cabin where there was no cell signal, just a crackling fireplace. Sitting across from her with socks on and no makeup, she said, You know what scares me the most? What? That I used to think I understood you just because I loved you. My eyes stung. But love without curiosity isn't seeing, she added. I think we're learning to look now, I said. She nodded. Yeah, we are. At Thanksgiving that year, something remarkable happened. During dinner, my dad turned to me, the table still quiet, forks paused midair, and said, I printed out your op-ed, the one in the journal, brought it to my poker group. We read it out loud. I choked on my wine. You what? He shrugged. It made me proud, thought others should hear it. It was one of the only times in my life I remember him saying the word proud. It fit. It filled a space I didn't know was still empty. And then there were the letters, dozens of them, from listeners, students, single moms, hospital administrators, even a retired librarian. They wrote things like, You made me feel visible. My daughter sent me this. We're talking again. I never thought quiet could be powerful until now. I kept every letter in a shoebox under my desk. I read them when the data gets heavy, when the policy battles drag on, when I feel like I'm vanishing again. Rachel eventually invited me back on her podcast, this time not as a surprise guest, but as co-host. We launched a series together, Family Ties, Conversations Between Sisters. It wasn't just about our journey, it was about how families carry stories and how silence writes over truth when no one's brave enough to ask. One guest, a psychologist, said most people don't lack love. They lack language. They don't know how to say, I see you, I'm listening, you matter. That episode became our most shared one. One night, after wrapping an interview, Rachel lingered at the studio. You know, she said, when I used to picture powerful women, I thought of stage lights and speeches. I raised an eyebrow. And now I think of you, reading legislation in your pajamas, showing up to county hearings, texting your staff at midnight to check if they got home safe. I laughed. It's not glamorous. No, she said, but it's real. And real sticks. I don't remember if I said anything in return. I just remember feeling enough. At the end of the year, Columbia awarded me the Public Service Medal. I almost declined, but Rachel insisted I go. Go, she said, not to be seen, but to let other people who are like you know they exist. So I went. At the podium, I said, I didn't get into public health to be known. I got in because I believe in systems, in bridges, in dignity. And if I've learned anything, it's that even the quietest among us can change what the future looks like, not by shouting, but by standing. They clapped, but more importantly, they listened. That's the difference now. People listen, not because I talk louder, but because I stopped hiding, and because finally I was invited to the table, not just to serve the meal, but to be part of the story. And maybe that's all most of us ever want, to be included, to be understood, to be named, not by our job or our role in someone else's spotlight, but by the quiet, honest truth of who we are, and to know that somewhere in this loud, distracted world, someone sees us clearly at last. I started getting invited to speak in more places. In the past, I used to avoid the spotlight, but now I understood. Sometimes stepping up isn't about needing to speak. It's about someone else needing to hear. At a medical school in Rochester, I spoke to a group of first-year students about my journey. After the talk, one student approached me and said, I always thought leaders had to be loud and tough,
but you made me believe someone can lead with calm. I looked him in the eye. You can lead with integrity, and quiet doesn't mean weak. Rachel began introducing me as my sister, my hero, during public events. No more vague words, no more careful phrasing. She even invited me to co-host a special event, Women Who Lead Quietly, celebrating women who aren't always mentioned but are quietly changing the world through perseverance. When I stepped onto the stage that day, I saw our parents sitting in the front row. My mother had tears in her eyes. My father, who never liked crowds, clapped longer than anyone else. We, as a family, learned to live together again, not by roles, but by understanding. Weekend dinners no longer revolved around Rachel. People asked about public health policy, community wellness, my experience managing crises, and I answered. Not to prove anything, but because I no longer felt the need to hide. I realized healing doesn't mean making everything perfect. It means allowing what's real to be truly seen. One day, after a joint interview, Rachel hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I was blind to it all." I replied, "I never give up on something I still love. I was just waiting for you to see." I wrote this story not to say I was right, but to remind anyone listening that each of us, no matter how quiet, has value. And sometimes that value just needs to be seen in the right light to ripple, to heal, to change an entire generation of silence. If you're living in someone else's shadow, or have ever been misunderstood, or made yourself small so others could stay comfortable, you're not alone. Your story matters too, and you deserve to be seen, not because of your title, but because of who you truly are. Live clearly, no permission needed. And that is the most beautiful thing I've learned from this journey. And now, if you've made it this far, thank you, truly. What you just heard isn't just one woman's story. It's the quiet truth of so many. Those of us who work hard, love deeply, and ask for so little, sometimes we go unseen. Not because we don't matter, but because we don't demand the room. But here's the truth. Being quiet doesn't mean being invisible. Being humble doesn't mean being small. And waiting to be seen doesn't make you weak, it makes you brave. So if you've ever swallowed your voice to keep peace, if you've ever been misunderstood by those who should know you best, if you've ever wondered, will they ever really see me? I hope this story reminds you. You are not alone. Your presence matters. And yes, one day, they will see you, clearly, just as you are. Until then, keep standing, keep living clearly, and never let anyone dim the truth of who you are.